Tonight, we are entering one of the strangest battle stories in the Bible, the story of Gideon in Judges 7, where an army heard a noise in the darkness and began turning its swords against itself. This was not a battle won by a larger army, stronger weapons, or a brilliant military charge. Gideon stood with only 300 men, and the moment that changed everything began with trumpets, clay jars, hidden torches, and a shout in the night. The question guiding this story is simple, but unsettling. Why would God make Gideon's army smaller before sending him into battle? And how could one night of sound, fire, and fear cause a powerful enemy camp to collapse from within? To understand that moment, we cannot begin with the trumpets. We have to begin earlier. In the years when Israel was not the side that made others afraid, Israel was afraid. The people were not standing proudly in open fields with banners raised. They were hiding in caves, protecting scraps of food, watching their harvest destroyed, and living as though the land beneath their feet no longer belonged to them. The book of Judges takes us into an ancient period before Israel had kings, palaces, royal courts, or a permanent national army. The tribes of Israel lived in a fragile world, often falling into cycles of fear, oppression, desperate prayer, and unexpected rescue in that world. Gideon does not first appear as a confident commander. He appears as a man trying to hide wheat from the enemy. And from that hidden place, the story begins to move. Before Gideon stood in the night above the camp of Midian, Israel had already been living under a shadow for years. The biblical text says that Midian oppressed Israel, and whenever the Israelites planted their crops, the Midianites and their allies came up against them. They did not come like a passing group of raiders who stole a little and vanished. They came like a force that swept across the land, destroying crops, taking animals, and leaving the people with almost nothing. For a society that lived close to the soil, losing the harvest was not only an economic disaster, it was the loss of tomorrow. A family could sow seed, wait through the season, watch the grain rise from the earth, and then, just as survival seemed possible, hear that the raiders were coming again. The fear was not only fear of battle, it was fear of dust on the horizon, fear of hooves near the fields, fear of another year's labor disappearing before their eyes. The Bible says the Israelites made hiding places for themselves in the mountains, in caves, and in strongholds. That image tells us what kind of world this had become. They were not living like people in full possession of their own land. They were living like people being hunted. The power of Midian had not only weakened their farms and flocks, it had entered their imagination and made fear feel normal. Imagine the land after another raid had passed. Fields trampled flat, storehouses emptied, families counting what little remained, children learning to lower their voices when strangers appeared near the hills. This is the emotional ground beneath the story. By the time Gideon is called, Israel has not only lost crops, Israel has lost the feeling of safety. Then Gideon enters the story. He is not introduced with a sword in his hand, standing in the open as a warrior ready for war. He is threshing wheat in a wine press, trying to keep it hidden from Midian. A wine press was not the usual place to thresh wheat. But that wrongness is exactly what makes the image so powerful. Gideon is doing the work of survival in a concealed place,
Is this all?
because even ordinary food has become something that must be protected from the enemy. This is the man who will later lead Israel into one of the most unusual battles in Scripture. Not a heroic figure first shown beneath a bright sky, but a man in a hidden place, trying to preserve what little life remains. The story begins with fear before it ever speaks of victory. It begins with a person whose first visible action is not attack, but concealment. When the messenger of the Lord calls Gideon a mighty warrior, the contrast is sharp to the eye. Gideon does not look mighty. He looks like a man shaped by a broken time, a man who has learned caution because open courage can be costly. Yet in biblical stories, a calling often does not begin when someone feels ready. It begins when someone is found in the place where they have been hiding. That matters because Judges 7 is not only the story of a weak army defeating a strong one. It is the story of fear changing direction. At the beginning, fear belongs to Israel. It pushes them into caves, into hidden places, into the quiet protection of whatever food they can save. But by the end, that fear will move into the camp of Midian. The ones who once made Israel tremble will wake in darkness, hear noise from every side, and lose the ability to tell friend from enemy. Before that reversal can happen, Gideon has to be drawn out of hiding. But the story does not rush to make him fearless. It keeps his humanity intact. Gideon is called, but he questions. He hears promises, but he seeks reassurance. He steps into his mission, but not with easy confidence. He steps into it as someone learning that the coming battle will not be won in the way human beings normally expect. That makes the story more powerful. If Gideon were already a fearless warrior, the battle could become only the triumph of a natural hero. But because Gideon begins as a man who knows fear, the sound of the trumpets later in the night carries a deeper meaning. It is not merely the sound of attack. It is the sound of fear beginning to leave the people who had been imprisoned by it. But before that sound breaks the darkness, Gideon must lose the thing every commander wants before battle: numbers. When Gideon gathers Israel to face Midian, the story seems, for a moment, to move in a familiar direction. An oppressed people have found a leader. Men have come together. Those who once hid in caves and strongholds have begun to stand in the open. Perhaps this is the moment when Israel regains strength by gathering enough people to fight back. But then the story turns in a strange direction. The Lord says to Gideon that the people with him are too many. That is a shocking statement if we feel the danger of the scene. Midian has oppressed Israel for years. The enemy camp is not small. Israel needs every advantage it can find. Yet the biblical text says Gideon's problem is not that he has too few men, but that he has too many. The reason is given clearly. If Israel wins with a large enough force, they may claim that their own hand has saved them. This is not a minor detail. It is the key that unlocks the meaning of the whole battle. This victory must happen in a way that cannot be mistaken for ordinary military success. Before Midian is broken, Israel's temptation toward pride is already being confronted. Gideon is told to announce that whoever is fearful may go home, and 22,000 men leave. Imagine that moment visually. A camp that had begun to feel full suddenly opens into emptiness. Men turn away in groups. Dust rises beneath their feet as they depart. Those who remain look around and realize that the army has become much smaller. There is something quiet and painful in that scene. These are not simply numbers disappearing from a page. These are bodies leaving the line, footsteps moving away from danger, faces turning back toward home. Gideon must watch the visible strength of Israel drain from the camp before the battle has even begun. But the story does not stop there. After 22,000 leave, 10,000 remain. By ordinary logic, that reduction already seems severe, but the biblical text continues. At the water, another test is given, and the army is reduced again until only 300 men remain. This is one of the most tense movements in the story. Instead of building hope by adding strength, the Bible builds the tension by removing the things people normally depend on. Every layer of visible security is stripped away. Each reduction makes victory seem less likely. But at the same time, the meaning of the battle becomes clearer. If victory comes now, it cannot easily be explained by numbers. For viewers who may not know the story, this point matters deeply. Gideon does not lead 300 men because he has invented a clever minimalist strategy. The biblical text places the reduction of the army inside a spiritual purpose. Israel is not to be rescued in a way that allows them to forget the source of their rescue. A people who had been crushed by fear could easily move from fear into pride, from desperation into self-glory. The story blocks that possibility before the battle even begins. From the outside, 300 men are far too few. They do not create a sense of safety. They are not enough to terrify Midian if we judge only by ordinary military strength. But their smallness makes the coming battle unlike a normal victory. From this point on, everything feels unusual. The winning side does not look strong enough. The first weapons emphasized are not swords. The sound in the darkness will do what a direct attack could not. The image of the remaining 300 should not be rushed. They are not only a famous number, they are the ones still standing after most have gone. They see the empty space around them. They know the Midianite camp is ahead, and perhaps they feel what Gideon feels from this moment on. No one can pretend that this is an even fight. But the story becomes even more human because Gideon, though called, is not presented as a man without fear. The Bible does not hide this. Before the night attack, the Lord tells Gideon to go down to the camp of Midian, and if he is afraid to go down, he may take his servant Purah with him and listen to what the enemy is saying. That detail deepens the whole scene. God has reduced Gideon's army, but he also knows Gideon's heart needs strengthening. The commander of the 300 is still the man once found hiding wheat in a wine press. Fear has not magically disappeared because he has received a mission. But in this story, fear is not denied. It is led to a place where Gideon will hear something he did not expect. The enemy is afraid too, so before sound breaks the night, Gideon must descend into darkness, not to fight, not to shout, not to lead a charge. He goes down to listen. Night settles over the valley, and the camp of Midian lies below like a dark sea of tents. For Israel, that camp had been a picture of overwhelming power. It carried the memory of ruined harvests, stolen animals, and families driven into hiding. But now Gideon does not look at it only from a distance, as something untouchable. He is told to go near it. He does not go alone. Purah, his servant, goes with him. The detail is small, but it gives the scene a quiet, human weight. Two figures move down through the darkness toward the edge of the enemy camp. They do not carry an army with them. They are not there to attack. They go close enough to hear. And there, the story does something unexpected. Gideon does not receive a new weapon. He does not receive a detailed battle plan. He hears a dream being told by a Midianite soldier. The man says he dreamed that a loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the camp of Midian, struck a tent, overturned it, and caused it to collapse. The image is strange. Not a boulder, not a sword, not a beast, a loaf of barley bread, an ordinary and humble thing, something associated with daily food and the life of common people. Yet, in the dream, this small thing rolls into the camp and brings down the tent. That symbol matters because it fits the whole movement of the story. Gideon is not a king. The 300 are not a massive army. The weapons are not impressive. Even the dream uses something plain and almost laughably small. Yet the small thing moves, and the tent falls. The dream turns the logic of power upside down before the battle ever begins. The soldier's companion interprets the dream in a way that changes everything for Gideon. He says it is the sword of Gideon, and that God has given Midian and the whole camp into his hand. The striking thing is that this confirmation does not come from Israel's camp. It rises from inside the camp of the enemy. Gideon, the man who still needed courage, hears the enemy unknowingly speak their own fear aloud. This is one of the most powerful psychological turns in the story. From the outside, Midian looks massive. It has tents, soldiers, weapons, and numbers, but inside, a dream has revealed a crack. Fear no longer belongs only to Israel. It has begun moving inside the people who once spread fear across the land. We need to tell this carefully. The biblical text says, Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation. It does not explain the private thoughts of every Midianite soldier. It does not give us a full analysis of the enemy's psychology. But what it does show is enough. Before the battle begins, Gideon hears a sign that the enemy's collapse has already been spoken in the darkness of their own camp. Imagine Gideon standing still at the edge of those tents, listening. He has lost most of his army. He has only 300 men. He holds no visible advantage. Yet in that moment, he realizes that the enemy is not as solid as it appears. Beneath the surface of strength, something is trembling. The text says that when Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he worshipped. Then he returned to the camp of Israel and told them that the Lord had given the Midianite camp into their hands. This is not empty confidence. It is born from hearing what was hidden inside the enemy. Gideon does not return because he suddenly sees himself as powerful. He returns because he has heard that Midian is already afraid. This scene prepares the climax of the story. If fear already lives inside the camp of Midian, then the trumpets, the broken jars, and the torches will not merely create panic from nothing. They will strike a place that is already dry. They will awaken an anxiety that the enemy cannot control. The night, then, is not only the night before an attack, it is the night when sound begins to carry a strange power. Gideon listens before Gideon acts. A dream is spoken before the trumpets are blown. A voice in the darkness prepares the way for the sound that will soon break the darkness. When Gideon returns to the 300, the plan still does not look like an ordinary battle plan. Each man will hold a trumpet, an empty clay jar, and a torch hidden inside the jar. These are not the objects we usually imagine in the hands of an army about to win. But this story has been moving against ordinary logic from the beginning. And now, the strangest moment is about to arrive. Gideon divides the 300 men into 3 companies. They move toward the Midianite camp at night, not as a great army filling the valley, but as small groups taking their places around the edges of the camp. In their hands are strange instruments for battle: trumpets, empty jars, and torches hidden inside the jars. The light is not yet revealed. The sound is not yet released. Everything waits for the appointed moment. The scene is powerful because of what is being held back. Below them, the camp of Midian lies in the darkness. Around it, the 300 men stand with fire covered in clay. They do not look like a force large enough to overrun the enemy. They look like a sign waiting to be unveiled. Then Gideon gives the signal, and the first sound tears through the night. The trumpets blow, the clay jars shatter, the vessels that had concealed the torches break apart, and suddenly fire appears in the darkness. At the same moment, the shout rises around the camp. This is the heart of the story. An army hears a noise in the night, but it is not only one noise. It is trumpets from different directions, jars breaking, voices shouting, and sudden points of fire appearing around the camp in an ancient night when recognition depended on sound, movement, and limited light. Such a shock could become a wave of terror. For the Midianites, the darkness itself would have made the moment worse. They wake without knowing how many enemies surround them. They hear signals that sound organized and deliberate. They see flames where there had been none. They do not wake into a clear battlefield. They wake into confusion. And confusion is the perfect ground for fear. But we have to keep close to what the biblical text says. The Bible does not present this only as a clever psychological trick. The text says the Lord set every man's sword against his companion throughout the camp. That places the event in a sacred dimension. Sound, fire, and surprise are what we can see on the surface. But the story wants us to understand that beneath the surface, a greater power is causing fear to change direction. Picture the Midianite camp waking into confusion. Soldiers rise from sleep, hearing trumpets around them, seeing flames on the edges of the darkness, hearing the shout echo across the valley. In that moment of disorientation, the camp that once represented strength becomes a place where no one knows what is happening. A man runs past a tent. A blade catches the firelight. Shouts collide with other shouts. Fear, once used by Midian to crush Israel, now turns inward. The 300 men of Gideon are not described as rushing down immediately in a conventional charge. They stand around the camp, holding their torches, blowing their trumpets, and keeping their positions. That makes the battle even stranger. The collapse does not begin because Israel overwhelms the enemy from the outside. It begins because the camp of Midian falls into chaos within itself. The enemy has swords, but the swords no longer point in the right direction. This is the moment promised by the title. An army heard a noise and started killing each other. Yet in the logic of Judges 7, this is not merely a battlefield accident. It is the result of a whole sequence of reversals. Israel had been afraid. Gideon had hidden. The army had been reduced. The enemy's fear had been revealed in a dream. And now sound and fire strike that hidden fear in the night. The images carry meaning without needing to be over-explained. Clay jars conceal fire until they are broken. A small army waits in darkness until the appointed time. Trumpets sound before swords are emphasized. A fragile object, a burst of light, a human shout, all become part of a victory that does not follow normal logic. Midian flees. The biblical text describes the army running, crying out, and escaping, and then other Israelites are called to pursue them. The battle continues beyond that first moment, but for this documentary, the center remains that night, the night when the camp of the oppressor was not first broken from the outside, but cracked open from within. After the trumpets came confusion. After the fire came running shadows. After the jars broke. A truth prepared from the beginning became visible. Numbers could not protect Midian from fear. And 300 men did not need to become a massive army in order to witness the enemy fall apart. But when the noise fades, the deeper question remains. If this were only a victory story, it could end with Gideon's triumph. But Judges 7 began with the warning that Israel must not boast. So the meaning of the battle cannot stop with who ran and who stood. It lies in the way the victory was shaped so that no one could take it as their own possession. After the chaos, Midian flees. Other Israelites are called out to pursue them, and the end of Judges 7 mentions the capture and death of 2 Midianite leaders, Oreb and Zeb. There is still aftermath. There is still pursuit. There are still political and military consequences. But if we only focus on that final chase, we miss what makes this battle so unusual. The true center lies in what happened before the pursuit began. A people who had once hidden in caves saw their enemy run in the dark. A man who had once hidden wheat in a winepress stood at the center of a victory he could not explain by natural confidence. An army reduced to 300 men watched a vast camp dissolve through trumpets, broken jars, torches, and fear. That is why this section should not feel like a loud celebration. The better feeling is silence after something strange and sacred has happened. The jars have been broken. The torches have burned. The trumpets have faded over the valley. And in that quiet, the question is no longer only, how did Gideon win? The question is, who truly won this battle? From the beginning of Judges 7, the answer has been prepared by the reduction of Gideon's army. The Lord did not want Israel to say that their own hand had saved them. So the battle is told in a way that makes boasting difficult. Gideon does not have a large enough army to claim victory by ordinary military logic. The 300 do not possess overwhelming strength. Even the decisive moment is not a heroic charge first, but a strange scene of sound, light, and panic. This does not make Gideon unimportant. He still has to listen. He still has to rise. He still has to divide the men, give the signal, and obey what he has been given. The 300 still have to walk into the night, take their positions, blow the trumpets, break the jars, and lift the torches. The story does not erase human obedience, but it places that obedience inside a larger frame, where the final result cannot be reduced to human talent. Fear has fully changed direction. At the beginning, Israel feared Midian so deeply that people hid in caves and guarded their food in secret. Gideon's first image is a man working in concealment. But on the night of the battle, Midian is the side that wakes in terror. They are the ones who run. They are the ones who lose control of their own camp. The reversal is deep. Those who once entered Israel's land like locusts cannot hold order among their own tents. Those who once ruined Israel's harvest are awakened by the sound of a small group. Those who once spread fear are swallowed by fear. The story does not need to explain this with a long moral speech. It lets the images speak. Caves at the beginning, chaos in the camp at the end. At the center of all this are ordinary objects, trumpets, clay jars, and torches, not thrones, not fortified walls, not chariots. A clay jar can break, a torch can be hidden, a trumpet sound disappears into the air, yet in the right moment, these fragile things become signs of something greater than themselves. That is how the story remains mysterious without becoming unclear. It does not simply tell us that visible strength can be misleading. It shows us a large army collapsing. It does not merely say that the weak can be used. It shows us Gideon, the man who hid wheat, standing before a victory no one could have predicted. It does not only say that fear can change direction. It lets us hear trumpets in the night and watch Midian run from its own darkness. There is also a quiet warning inside the victory. Israel is being rescued. But the rescue is shaped in a way that protects the story from becoming a monument to human pride. The people may remember Gideon. They may remember the 300. But the structure of the battle keeps pointing beyond them. The smaller the army becomes, the harder it is to make the army the center. In the end, Judges 7 is not only the story of a battle won, it is the story of a victory removed from the hands of human pride. It is told in such a way that the strongest explanation is not Gideon's brilliance, not Israel's numbers, and not the strength of the 300. The strongest explanation is the one the biblical text has been giving from the beginning. This battle belongs to the Lord, and perhaps that is why the story still feels so haunting. It is not simply that a small army defeated a larger one. It is that the larger army carried within itself a fear it could not master. It is that the sound in the night revealed what was already breaking beneath the surface. It is that the weakest looking side stood still with fire hidden in clay, while the strongest looking side fell apart with swords in its hands. The victory no one could claim is the victory the story wants us to remember. So, when we return to the question that opened this story, the answer is not only military. Why did God make Gideon's army smaller before the battle? Because this victory was never meant to be remembered as the triumph of human strength alone. It had to happen in a way that stripped away easy explanations. until Israel could no longer point to its numbers, its weapons, or its courage as the final reason the enemy fell. And how did one night of sound, fire, and fear cause a powerful army to destroy itself from within? The biblical text gives the deepest answer directly. The Lord turned the swords in the camp against one another. But the story also lets us feel the human surface of that moment. Darkness, sudden trumpets, breaking jars, hidden flames revealed all at once, and a camp already carrying fear inside it. Gideon's story does not ask us to imagine a hero who never trembled. It gives us a man who began in hiding, listened in the dark, and obeyed when the plan still seemed impossible. It gives us 300 men holding fragile objects in the night. It gives us an army that looked powerful from the outside, yet collapsed when fear awakened within. When the trumpets faded and the torches burned low, the valley must have felt different. The people who once hid from the harvest raiders had seen the raiders run. The man who once protected wheat in secret had watched a camp fall apart under a power larger than himself. And somewhere in the silence after the battle, the story left its deepest mark. Sometimes the thing that looks strongest is already trembling inside. Sometimes the thing that looks too small to matter is being held for the exact moment it will be revealed. And sometimes, in the strange world of the Bible, the sound that breaks the night is not merely noise. It is the beginning of fear changing sides,